Welcome to the Stories Are Soul Food podcast, presented by Cannonball Books, the kids' fiction imprint of Cannon Press.
Met a ghost of a king on the road when I first fell. Fire burning to my knees I fell. Met a ghost of a king on the road.
Here we are.
105, as the French say.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. Welcome to Sasf.
Audible thinking from me.
Click. Welcome to Sasf.
Well, everybody will be deep into the first Fableman's discussion.
Yeah.
This will be.
Yeah, we'll see about that.
Dropping after.
Do we announce the next movie right now?
Yeah.
And then barge ahead.
Yes,
Okay,
we do.
next one is Slumdog Millionaire.
Slumdog Millionaire.
Slumdog Millionaire.
Yeah, if you pronounce it like
A great film. Many good things about it and things to discuss. So we'll talk about it later.
and I'm trying to
Join
think,
us, won't you?
We
as
might.
we look at this moving picture.
I'm trying to think. You got to decide whether you can show it to your family or not. That's going to be our policy. We had a few people.
Yeah, no,
who
completely.
who are surprised at something in Fableman's. I'm not quite sure what, but you have to decide.
Here's the thing with Fableman's. Phone. I'm gonna throw my phone over there. I think we've been really clear about filtering.
Yeah.
So it's up to you. It's not on us. Not on us
I
at
didn't
all.
show it to my family,
I did,
but
and I filtered it.
there you
And
go.
so it was very lightly filtered. I watched it with my older kids at some point with no filters, and with my younger with one scene taken out. Really. So,
Nice.
but it's it's really, really minimal. And
Yeah.
there's one excruciating mom scene that was just
Yeah.
like, yeah, okay,
You don't need to be
yeah, we can cut that.
the mental energy.
Yep. But it basically, this is like, you have to take responsibility. You have to take authority over what you watch with your kids and how and when. That's not us, not our job. So we'll talk about all sorts of things. I'll talk about Saving Private Ryan in 1917. I'll talk about the movie Magnolia as an amazing film
Which I still need to watch. You've told me
at
that.
some point. But it's a jagged pill. But that one is one that, if I talk about something, you have to assume you still have to go do your due diligence and know that there's stuff in there that you don't want to watch. I'm not vouching for all the content.
It's not vouching. We're talking about this,
No film
the film.
that is discussed here is being 100% vouched for, unless I say I 100% vouch for everything in there. So
Unless we
Slumdog
make
Millionaire.
it.
Slumdog Millionaire is one that I watched with my kids, a little bit younger. There's definitely some things that were a little too rough for them. And more thematically, like thematic stuff that just
The
it's
spoons. The
it's
hot
just brutal.
spoons.
It's just
Yeah.
brutal. There's some tough things in there that I didn't feel like small imaginations need to know about. So that's how I handled it. Fableman's I did watch with my kids. My kids are older than your kids.
Yeah.
And take authority over the whole thing, and pony up, Dad. Pony up. So like, pay for Clear Play, pay for VidAngel. Pony up.
Pony
There you
up.
go.
And
Pony
now,
up.
And now we ride.
So that you can take authority over the stuff. Yes. And at dawn we ride. Okay, so Slumdog is our next one for Lamp.
Yep. March.
The next moving picture
March
we're
is
going to look
lamp.
at.
And today is just that Smorgasbord episode we were promising, but we
I don't
lost
remember
it.
promising anything.
Promise is a strong word. We were hinting it would be coming. We answer your questions. We've got a stat.
We vowed. We vowed.
We'll see if any of these spark interest.
Let's go.
First off, Prince of Egypt, the best Christian cartoon.
No, false.
What is?
Does there have to be a best Christian cartoon?
Can we just say a good Christian cartoon?
Spirited Away.
Boom. I agree with that 100%. Also, I ran this by, in-house animator, Forrest, and he said, "What are you talking about, Christian cartoon? It was made
By Spielberg. Yeah.
DreamWorks."
Yeah.
And
Yeah. So do we mean Bible cartoon?
yeah, is that what they mean? They mean Bible story? Because then
I
obviously,
really
yes.
do like Prince of Egypt, and especially some of the musical pieces are fantastic. The thing I really, really hate a lot about Prince of Egypt is the toxic effect that it's had on people's Bible story literacy. When they watch that film, they know the film, and then they interpret scripture through that lens. And so Pharaoh's magicians are doing card tricks and sleight of hand, and it's all fake.
Although they still have some nice some nice demonic stuff.
Kind
they
of.
turn it. They don't go all in. I would say
They're throwing powder in water. You know, it's like it's all. They're not turning water into blood, and it would have been much stronger if these magicians were actual magicians doing actual, powerful, dangerous things. That's just Moses is that much scarier. I do enjoy Prince of Egypt. My kids watched Prince of Egypt.
Yep.
And then Prince we worked very hard. Like that's one of the big things we talked about is that modern materialists can't possibly get to a place where they believe the Bible story. We just don't believe the Bible story. My sister was just telling me about the Museum of the Bible, and she brought it up as, hey, you know who does not know how to tell a Bible story? The Museum of the Bible doesn't know how to tell a Bible story. She's like, as you're going through, you notice that there's nothing miraculous anywhere.
Oh no.
It's all very materialistic and not miraculous, except for God. God is present and does things, but there's no, just even Goliath is not referred to as a giant. Like everything's just
a very tall man. That's the Susan.
Well, it's nebulous. It's vague. It's empty.
Well, that's the Susan Wise Bauer approach. Is they say the cubit actually isn't 18 inches. Back then, it's maybe 12. So
Goliath was actually 5'8", it turns out.
And all the Israelites were midgets.
And I'd like to add, he was 5'8", and he had brittle bone disease and was suffering from asthma, and basically was going to die anyway.
So David pebbled him, and that was
really the whole story is about end of life care and and the mercy David showed. It's amazing.
It's a euthanasia story.
It's really amazing the wild contortions that modernists will go, and especially modern Christians will go to not have outrageous things they believe in, to not have the fantastical, to not have the amazing,
not
to
have
just
the things that make you uncomfortable.
This thing I believe, it really is about as exciting as unflavored gelatin. That thing I believe, it's like, here, have a Jell-O jiggler with no flavor. It's just this.
He was tall, all right.
This clear thing of like, there was a guy and he fell down. That's all I'm saying. There was a guy and he fell over. Other than that, I don't know.
I mean, an aneurysm can take out anyone at any time.
But it's ridiculous how hard people work to not have scripture say things.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's proof. The fact that Katzenberger is the one in charge of our best Bible story. I mean, he's the one watching.
Katzenberg, not a burger. Please. Don't be offensive. Yeah.
That it's that thing your dad always says about if you want to ask someone what the Bible says, ask a liberal. Ask a liberal, because they don't have to believe it. So they just said,
Susan Weisbauer feels like she's stuck with
the text,
the result. So that's why it's so important that Goliath be, just any old dude, any guy.
7 foot max.
I'm still 5'8", probably.
I just think it's hilarious that she thinks all the Israelites had itty bitty forearms. With their
really baby
their
arms.
Cubits.
This is honestly, this was a race of part human, part T-Rex, tiny little arms.
Just so that the measurement for Goliath can be correct.
Itty bitty. Yeah. Just so he can be itty bitty.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. Anyway, Prince of Egypt, good film. I liked it. But it's actually a perfect example of the kind of thing you do at a low level. So what we were doing with Fablemans when we were talking through the film, and we're breaking it down and talking about theme and what the film's about. When you're watching Prince of Egypt with your kids, that's the kind of thing you're talking about. You're saying which things are good, which things are bad, which things are inaccurate, which things are false. Why are they false? Why are they saying it this way? Why do they represent Pharaoh's magicians this way? And you have to break it apart. So we loved it. We watched it a ton, and we had that conversation regularly with our kids about what's wrong about it. Take authority over it creatively. That is probably the single most important thing you can do with anything. So that we didn't hesitate to watch it and to love it and to watch it a lot.
Soundtrack's pretty good.
But I made sure that the inoculation was there, that my kids understood and were even flexing their muscles. So once they knew, the next time they watch it, they were looking for it. They're objecting to it. They're finding those things that
they're complaining when Pharaoh gets out of the Red Sea at the end. That kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
No, he's dead.
He dead. He dead and gone.
He's under that water.
Nobody knows where those bones are.
Yeah. Okay. Nice. we have so many people asking us about The Chosen, but right now neither of us have watched it.
Yeah, I haven't seen it.
So
Ton of respect for what Dallas has done, building that. It's definitely a massive outlier, a massive anomaly, and it's been really potent in clear ways. I'm not the target audience. I've not watched it. I haven't gone into it.
Yeah. Great. We actually have a bunch of new listeners, and so we got to do this question that may be familiar, but why did you choose to write in the middle grade genre?
Right.
And what are some of your favorite middle grade books?
Okay.
And again, do share the pod with your friends, families, enemies, everyone who needs to hear the pod.
Do I have to?
Not you. you don't have to do anything. Just
for me, you should all know that these conversations are conversations that I have in secret with Brian, and I expect no one to listen to.
Nate was like, somehow someone heard this again.
How did they hear this? Who leaked? who leaked our private conversation that we had into microphones? Why did I choose middle grade? It's actually kind of funny, and I'll do this at high speed if possible. I wrote a short story for a little literary journal. And the short story is called Conversations with Todd, and I really enjoyed it a lot. It was my N.D. Wilson does Flannery O'Connor, my version. So not Flannery. I wasn't just imitating, but her kind of structure.
Mm-hmm.
So it was her structural approach. And then later I got a cocktail napkin in the mail from Esquire magazine, and they said, "Hey, can you write a story on this? Can you write a story on a cocktail napkin?" And it's this little paper cocktail napkin, and I thought, yeah, that's really sure. This could be fun. And I was thinking, what could I possibly write? And I took it down to my buddy's bookstore at the time, Ball and Cross Books, downtown Moscow, run by Mark Beecham, good friend from way back. And I'm sitting there at a table in this bookstore with this little cocktail napkin. And I look up and I see this huge volume on a shelf that says The Rise and Fall of Judaism. This really big, massive thing. And I thought, you know what? This needs to have a funny, enormous title. Like, this is going to have a very big, grand title on a napkin.
Grandiose.
And so I named it, that short story, The Rise and Fall of Circumcision.
A great story if you read it, full of discomfort and joy.
And then I cut the napkin into little tiny strips, and then I typed with a manual typewriter. I typed on the napkin and then stitched it, little red thread in the spine, stitched it together into a little napkin novel, this tiny little napkin novel, and sent it off to Esquire magazine. It's like, haha, there you go. Well, they published it in facsimile, and they scanned all the pages and ended up publishing it. And unfortunately published it in their sex issue. And so
no one could read it.
So this magazine comes out and I get copies in the mail, and I was like, oh gosh, like, no, they publish it. This is great. That's hilarious. But oh no,
not one you're going to frame on the wall there. Yeah.
And then it's kind of funny because I had a project that was in early days. I was working on a bigger adult novel and had chapters, and was kind of tentatively, starting to sniff around with what I wanted to do is with a career, where I was going to try to write. And I was working on middle grade stuff at the same time. And the way everything synced up is I ended up with opportunities to go publish in the adult market or to go publish in the children's market. So it ended up being very much a door number 1, door number 2 scenario. And I had pursued middle grade, and I love writing other stuff too. But I'd pursued it for a couple of big reasons. And one was a friend of mine who also writes middle grade. She told me that middle grade is all of the intelligence, none of the hormones. That's number 1. I can believably write adventure stories about 12 and 13-year-olds, and people can project adult level athleticism and adult level, intellect paired with coming of age, innocence, and not yet obsessed with relationships. And so you can tell the story. You can tell the story and not get into a triangle relationship always, like YA tends to. There's always some kind of love triangle
Yeah,
that's in
the later Harry Potter books. Everyone.
Yeah, it's in the B story. It tends to be in that B story spot in all of YA. Sometimes it's in the A in the A story, but all the intelligence, none of the hormones. But also, what I get to do is I get to write real wholesome comfort food that inspires the imagination and has a concrete ending where good triumphs over evil. And I can say, I have to do that. It's for the kids. And then most of the readers are still adults. So most of my readers are still tons of kids have read these books, obviously. I'm really still kind of surprised at how many copies I've sold, and how many books have sold. But adults are reading these heavily as well.
Yeah.
So middle grade was an opportunity for me to write stories that were really focused on story, classic story architecture, without getting hung up on the hormone side, and also to, in an age of despair and apathy, write with concrete triumphs of goodness over evil.
Dare we say stories are soul food?
Yeah.
Almost.
And so basically I chose to write middle grade because I wanted to serve as much wholesome food as I could to as many people as I could. If I went into the adult literary market, I actually had a project called Thrones. This is pre-Game of Thrones, which is kind of funny. So there was this pitch, and that was kind of floating, and then post Esquire and the Napkin novel editors were interested, and they really wanted to even take me into like a more like hybrid literary commercial direction. So we want to sell, but we want to like be hoity-toity.
Yeah.
And do the literary thing. The problem there is trying to land a literary story in the way that I see the world and tell the truth would immediately ghettoize me and put me at odds with the market and the genre. Because
so you mean the sort of Christian certainty and the knowledge of evil. And
the ultimate triumph of goodness over evil, and all those things I could do in middle grade, I couldn't do if I was writing adult.
If you're writing literary fiction,
yeah, adult literary fiction was not something that I can
because
do that
that's
in.
Because they love the sort of waffle.
They love despair and like they love
tragedy.
Christopher Nolan's wobbling top at Inception of like, is it real? Is it a dream? I don't know. We're just going to leave it there with.
Could you say almost that postmodernism affected the literary fiction world
100%,
much more than the middle grade? 100%. Because kids don't care about postmodernism.
No, they want to eat a good piece of apple pie. They want to eat macaroni and cheese. They want to eat a good meal that inspires them and fuels their imaginations. And here's the beautiful thing. So do adults. Adults also want to read that. They also want to. And because they also want to, if I publish middle grade, adults still read it.
Yeah.
And I get to serve the kind of soul food I want to serve. And the kind of soul food I think actually serves people, the thing that actually helps people. And so even with like Ashtown, so the series Ashtown covered stays a little younger, but it ages up. The volumes get a little older, target slightly older readers. Ashtown ages up more extremely. I slotted it in middle grade via the ages of my protagonists in the first book at the beginning. But then the way I get to spend time with adult characters, the length of those stories, the kinds of things I'm building later on, when I'm in book 3, it's like that actually is that's for the adults. That's for the older. It's for the older people.
Yeah,
and kids love
Cyrus
it too.
would go from 13 to 15 or 16 over the course
marching,
of the novel,
and we keep marching up. And so, writing middle grade enabled me to put good food on the table that would feed the most people across the most demographics in a way that aligned with what's true, good, and beautiful in the world. Writing literary fiction, I knew I'd just get dropped. I'd be at war with the critics. I'd be at war with my editors.
Everyone would say it's too nice and tidy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not to say nobody's ever written literary fiction in a way that resolves in a good way. Plenty of people have.
And we've mentioned those on
here. But overwhelmingly you can't. Overwhelmingly, you have to pull your punches there. And so Marilyn Robinson is pulling the punches of goodness. Like she's softening the light, she's softening the goodness, and she's amplifying other things as well that shouldn't be amplified. Like just the ratios are broken. And so that's kind of a long answer to why I prefer middle grade. Yeah. I really love middle grade. And when I was sitting there at that moment where it's like, man, I can go down this road, where I could be caustic and cautionary, and I could be O'Connor, I could go there and pursue a Flannery career, or I could try to write more commercial adult stuff. But even there, they demand a level of sexuality and other things that are, I'm just not going to be writing. Or I can write middle grade, and I can follow the roadmap laid down by Lewis, where I'm trying to impact the greatest number of people with the best meal that I can, and I'm doing it through this doorway, through that middle grade novel. And so I chose to imitate Lewis. Will I ever write adult fiction like Lewis did? The answer is absolutely I will. I plan to, but I plan to do it after I'm pretty well established in my flavor and my brand. I could do that now and write what I want to write and be fine. So that's not an issue anymore.
How does movies play into that? Because you've been doing quite a movie jag, I guess.
Yeah, more TV. That plays into it a lot. It actually is tapping into the other side, kind of the other side of what I had at the beginning, where I'm pulling in adult stories and older stories. And so the things like the projects I have going right now are, big giant swords and sandals Bible story. That's more adult teen. Middle grade kids could watch it, but they would be the very youngest who could possibly watch it. And then a more, a little more teen and up thriller. And then more of what Hollywood would say a YA project. That's not what publishing means when they say YA. Think of it as boys on bikes, boys on bikes entourage show. And then a crime procedural, like a rural crime procedural. So I've got these different things all going. We'll see which of them survive, and they all kind of hit different aspects of stuff I love to do. But ultimately, when I see the future at all, I see myself writing very much in the vein I started in, but having filled in a lot of other stories along the way.
Nice. That's great. Yeah, I guess you answered that question then too. Lewis is the inspiration.
Yeah. Yep, Lewis is the roadmap.
Grade. He's the middle
grade.
And
I tried to imitate him and failed. Even in just my career, I was like, I'm going to be a teacher and a writer, and it turned into I can be a little part-time teacher. That's it. Little bits here and there. I just have to write, and so I had to jump into the full-time writing side pretty rapidly. And that was it. So I've been a writer who teaches occasionally instead of a teacher who writes in the breaks of the school schedule.
Yeah.
But yeah, Lewis, definitely. I don't know that I'll ever write it till we have faces, but I definitely want to write a space trilogy. And I mean that only, not an actual space trilogy. I just mean those are my favorite. That space trilogy is the absolute best. And so at some point I have to imitate.
Right.
I've got to imitate that someday when I'm growing up.
Speaking of Lewis, a question from Steven. What is the deal with Bacchus and all the revelry at the end of Prince Caspian?
What's the deal with it?
That's what Steven says. Do you have a vibe? A quick answer, a little literary analysis, all of a sudden on a sleepy podcast afternoon.
Yeah, it's that one is revelatory of the way Lewis viewed the world and his medieval cosmology. So if you really want to understand it, you should read the Space Trilogy and The Discarded Image. So if you read The Discarded Image, nonfiction, great book, and then also read the Space Trilogy, you start to get a handle on the way Lewis thought the world worked, and the way that branch of reality, that branch of creation functions. And then that scene and that ending start to make a lot more sense.
And then Planet Narnia, always start with the primary sources. You can follow it up with Planet Narnia.
Yeah, you can read Planet Narnia too. I'm actually I
think we've argued about this on the
Yeah, I'm less. I know my dad's all in on Planet Narnia, and so are other people. I'm less so.
Yeah.
But it's not because I disagree. I disagree with his attribution of intentionality.
Yeah.
I think it's more intuitive. I think Lewis is an intuitive genius. I don't think he had some big scheme like that. I think it was more reflexive.
You think his mind was so structured and his view of the world made so much sense?
Yep. I think it turned into, this will be fun.
Yeah.
And I think that's I don't think there was a a real.
Yeah.
I say this as a writer who's had a lot of people build theories, and I've had like college papers sent to me of people breaking down my themes, and some of them I look at and I think, wow, yeah, you're right. It's like, but no, that was more intuitive and reflexive that it ended up that way because I was playing in that key.
Okay.
It's like you're playing a particular song and you decide to play it in this key and you go, and then people notice, hey, look how it's still this key and still this key. Yep, still this key. And afterwards, you're like, wow, I didn't do that. 2 of those I did on purpose. That one I did not do on purpose, but I see how it completely fits with your theory. It's like, and so
maybe I'll have to reread again. I thought it was just way too many.
Way
too many coincidences.
I don't deny the conclusion.
Yeah.
In terms of, put it this way. I don't deny his analysis of the books. I think that the level of scheming that went into it.
That's the part you think.
I mean, Lewis wrote Voyage of the Dawn Treader by hand in one draft, basically, and then did slight revisions. He's not
scheming. He doesn't have a wall for medieval illusions.
It's an outworking of who he is and everything that was already in there. He was a genius, and he was a reflexive, intuitive genius. And this is how the books came out of that reflexive, intuitive genius.
Yeah, so the Bacchus thing to me makes sense because Tolkien does the exact same thing. He just built all the mythology behind it. So when he peels it back, you don't notice.
And Tolkien's objection to Lewis was that he would willy-nilly throw in mythology whenever he felt like it.
So Tolkien would hate Bacchus and Silenus showing up in the middle of Narnia.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially because he makes no attempt to fit them in. They just show up.
And so that, exactly. And so that's the kind of thing Tolkien hated because he wanted it to be like internally consistent and coherent at all times. Right. And Lewis didn't care.
Right.
And so
he said, I needed grapevines to pull down this bridge. So enter
exactly.
Bacchus.
And then you have, but the myth mixing that you see in the space trilogy as well, where it's just like, hey, and how about Arthur and Merlin and all these other things. And that drove Tolkien nuts because so the fact that Lewis is cooking without a recipe and throwing things in is why I find the project of Planet Narnia fundamentally suspicious, while not disagreeing with any of his analysis of the works.
Yeah.
So his analysis of the works is different than his attribution of the giant blueprint and scheme and all this kind of stuff. I really do think Lewis was that much of a genius.
Yeah. Well, that's fun. I also think it's fun to watch how comfortable Lewis is taking classical things we think of as pagan and Christianizing them.
Baptizing them real quick.
Yep.
And putting them to work.
Silenus is clearly a drunkard.
Yeah.
But he's here.
And he's obeying.
And he's at the salvation of Narnia, and the transformation of the little...
I will say that was weird, though.
That is pretty strange.
I think there were other ways. He could have done that. So... to make sense of Lewis's perspective, discarded image in the space trilogy and some of his letters, but I think that we could fairly criticize that character in that moment. We could still use grapevines. We didn't need it.
See, we're discerning fans.
Yeah,
we don't just love everything Lewis.
Well, no, I do.
We do. I
pretty much do just love everything Lewis. I don't pretend like it's perfect.
Yeah.
For me, it's like finding a raisin in a cookie. There's these little moments where there's a raisin and yet I still even like the raisin and I liked it.
Yeah.
And I can objectively see that
it's just a little moment of
I could see that could have been better. that could have been better. And I've done this. I'm guilty of this all the time. Like there's plenty of people who said, why did you do this? Or why did you do that? And I'm like, for me, because I was having fun. That's why I did that. And that's clearly one of those moments that's for Lewis. Like that's for him.
Yeah.
That's part of his pleasure.
Yeah. So Logan has another sort of tangential Lewis question. The pools from Magician's Nephew, the doors from the 100 Cupboards, and then the Marvel Multiverse, which we've made fun of before.
Yeah.
Why? Logan's saying they seem similar.
Nope.
There you go, Logan. That's the answer. Why are they different?
Well, it's
because
there's the multiverse is built around weird theories of layering reality and choices being made differently. Mm-hmm. So there's like a choice gets made slightly differently and spins off another reality, and just you're infinite. And I think that the multiverse is retardation station because there's no confinement, there's no restriction, there's no governance of it. It's just it's where you get to say, and then magic, and you don't have to explain the coherence of it and just crazy stuff
because
happens.
and then you push someone on it and they say, well, if you jump into a different world, it'd be slightly different. That's sort of to me, that seems like an authorial.
When you are doing the wood
trick.
between the worlds, you're going to charn a very specific place, a very different kind of place, and a very different world with its own dying sun and its own history and everything else. And you're bouncing around. So it
might be different time wise.
But the connectivity between different worlds, the fact that there are these different worlds with their different space times, and that you can hop potentially between them, okay, sure, fair enough.
Yeah.
But when you get into the multiverse versus like what the multiverse is versus but the wood between the worlds is doing versus what's happening in cupboards.
And here's an interesting one. Do you think it's real? Do we have wood between the worlds type places that we can find?
I mean, why not say yes?
I think that's, if you feel that way, you're the right listener for this podcast.
And I will say this, if you watch Doctor Strange and you think there's a similarity between how his knobs are getting spun and the portals are working, I think there's a similarity to 100 cupboards. I do too. So there you go.
Stolen. Borrowed. Yeah.
Influenced.
Yeah.
But I also, it's one of those things, it's not like I'm the only person who've ever thought of stuff like that. But that kind of thing, I'm talking about the mechanics of its presentation.
Right.
It's like, because it's not like Strange had portals, things like that. In the comics and that kind of thing. I'm talking about the act, just kind of the
specific dial spinning to locate the correct planet. Yeah.
That kind of a thing was a little bit of an echo, felt like.
I don't know. I mean, I think we've got in the Bible Enoch walking with God and the idea of the understanding of mountains and the connections of the heavens. I feel like we've got a case that can be made.
Yeah, I mean, I threw out the idea once that the Transfiguration was.
Oh yeah, that
was
people came back with many questions about good questions too. It made me think I should have been more doubtful of your theory when it happened.
It's a great theory. It's not even my theory. It's my brother-in-law's theory, and I happen to think it's magnificent.
Okay.
And
good.
I'm also not even saying that it is the case. I'm just saying that that's the kind of thing that could have been the case, and that'd be great. And I like it a lot.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of thinking about the New Testament and the Old Testament as one piece together can only be helpful.
Yeah. How's that hurt?
Yeah.
The idea of Moses being there and then coming down the mountain, shining, is also fun.
Yeah, you like to mess with understandings of time.
I do.
And it's one of your favorite things.
Because nobody understands it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I can't give you a coherent theory of time because nobody can.
You're right.
But I can kind of destroy and reveal the incoherence of your theory of time.
Well, speaking of theories of time, I do think this might be illustrative. You've got sort of a multiverse situation in Outlaws of Time where you use a bit of that trick where you...
Nope.
I suppose we're not doing too many spoilers, but you allow future selves to return.
Yeah.
But I think, your defense is there's a limited finite number of them and they're being used in a particular way, right?
Two things. I created an arbitrary rule for that story, which I really like, actually, is that for the two selves.
This is Outlaws, by the way, Outlaws of Time.
Yeah. Basically, if you went back in time and you found yourself, one of you is going to drop dead, that your soul can only inhabit one at a time.
Okay.
It's like it's not a materialistic. Yeah. You're not clones. Yeah. It's like this is. So in presence with yourself, the weaker version is going to die. There's only going to be one of you. And that was just a fun device and a story to play with. Mm-hmm. But it also just added a layer of restriction. The concept of time there being that you have basically there is a time, there's an inside of time, and there's an outside of time. And we do know this. Like we can say that much. There's inside and there's outside.
Time's created.
Yeah. So there's inside and there's outside. The question is, what we don't really know what time is, and people argue about that. And so when they say inside of what, inside of causation, outside of causation, well, that's ridiculous. Is it just causation? But the concept of outside, and so the ability of a villain or of a person, Father Tiempo, Father Time, Priest of Time, to exit time and to enter time. So they're exiting and they're entering, they're moving to outside. And so when we say there is an inside of time, there's an outside of time, that means you could go somewhere that there is no time. And then you could come back. Now, what are the rules? No idea. Could you survive that? No idea. But in terms of story, the idea of moving out and then back in somewhere else is not that hard. It's not that difficult. There's an inside, there's an outside. So if a character can get into the outer darkness, if they can get where the worm dieth not, if they can move into this outside, and then re-enter somewhere else, that's the question. And there's a whole long theory that of tangled thread that I won't bore you with. But there's more internal coherence to the whole thing than people think. Now, am I trying to say that this is how time actually works? No, I'm not. But we know time travel is possible. We know time travel is possible inside of time because we're doing it right now.
Just one way. Unidirectional time travel.
Yeah, unidirectional time travel.
Mm-hmm.
We also know that it's not all even at a constant rate of speed. So inside of time.
Wait, we know that?
We do. So we know that this is like you separate things, you bring them back together. There's all sorts of things. Anybody who's ever sat through a really boring class knows that time does not always move at the same rate of speed.
Perceptionally.
No, it actually doesn't.
It actually slows down.
There are times when we say, man, that took years off my life. And you're like, yep. Meaning like, sure, perceptionally, but I think there's something to it as well. And there's been a fair number of experiments that you read up on and you're like, okay, actually does
buy it. Well,
it does make sense that time's not it. And it's like, if it is a river, then why would we maintain that every molecule in that river is moving at the same rate? It's like it's moving at the same rate through the river.
I mean, you've already sold me on the fact that we can change time by praying for something that's already occurred that we don't know has happened. You've sold me on that one. I can't remember if this was on the podcast or just in life.
Yeah, you could change.
So I guess, I don't know. Maybe I'm just a step away. You could,
for example, if you found out that your great-grandfather was a Lutheran minister and then he went apostate and then he burned alive in some horrible factory fire, you could pray pray that he would have repented before he died, that he had the chance to repent. Now, okay, that was generations ago. Why would you pray for that? And the answer is because God is outside of time. You're not, but you're talking to one who is. And it's not complicated for him to hear your prayer and to answer you yes or no.
70 years previously.
Now, if you pray that he would not have died, then you've already got your answer. Like God's already.
Or if you pray, if he's in hell, can he get out right now? That's another one.
That's also different.
Yeah.
But if you're praying about something where you don't have an answer yet, you've not yet been given an answer. You're not asking God to go back and rewrite something. You're looking to contribute and speak into what was written then.
Yeah.
Like that's what you're looking to do. And the fact that God is outside of time means that anyone in relationship with him can affect anything at any time. Like that's pretty cool. Yeah. But the fact that we're traveling through time now, it's just right now here, I'm doing it at 1 second per second. Like I am traveling through time. Time is a thing that we travel through. Means that there's complexities to it. It's just a question of, can we accelerate? Can we go back? I think most parodies and farces and so on are just dumb. Lewis really liked the idea of going back in time, but having it being absolutely unchangeable. In fact, The Great Divorce was inspired, and his concept of heaven was entirely inspired by that concept. So a concept in a little short science fiction story that he read that nobody's ever been able to find, where somebody went back in time and the past has happened. And so you could be there, you could inhabit it, you could look at it, but you can't actually change it. And in changing it, or in trying to change it, you're just going to be destroyed. And so a raindrop will rip through you like a bullet. If you try to
Because you can't stop that from
if you try to bend a blade of
falling.
grass, it's going to just pierce your foot, because it was written and it cannot be unwritten. And it's that idea that caused him to write The Great Divorce and to write Heaven that way. So very different context. He didn't use it in a time story, but he really liked that. So anyway, time is tricky. And I think I did a decent job of creating a coherent time framework, but I still know that everything breaks down. When you start playing with time travel, ultimately everything breaks down. I created rules to try to make it make sense, more sense coherently than otherwise, at least for the writing of it. But people either love those stories or they don't. And so I actually there's a bunch of fans who like the Outlaws of Time trilogy better than anything else I've written. I think they're drawn to that kind of mind bending and fun. They'd be probably the people who actually do like the multiverse. And then there's the Ashtown fans, and then there's the Covered fans, and it's funny how much differentiation there is in the group. But those people who like the like Christopher Nolan weirdness,
the resolution,
and also like the old westiness or the fantasy western.
I mean, snake arms,
It's funny to me though, the number of people who will just be like, "Man, Outlaws of Time, best thing you've ever written. Why don't you write more things like that?" Or Lee Pike Ridge, why did you ever write any fantasy? You should have just only written that kind of magical realism, and so on. Very soft magical realism. Yeah, but everybody's got their flavors, and I'm just the guy at Baskin Robbins ready to scoop whatever.
Yeah, I like it. That's all we got time for today. We have a few left over, but of course, you can subscribe.
One more rapid fire. We got any more? Any more?
Well,
no.
Vampires.
Vampires.
What are your thoughts on vampires?
They suck.
Blood. Really pretty boring, I think.
Yeah, I think they're boring.
We did an episode on ghosts, and I think everything we said for ghosts goes for vampires in a paler version. Vampires are less interesting than ghosts. And we didn't think ghosts were very interesting.
There's things that are vampiric can be interesting, things that feed off the lives of others, but vampires themselves I do find pretty boring.
Yeah.
Although I will say, I used them in Ashtown, and
did we?
Well, the Dracula family, even Radu Bey, and I use them specifically because the Vlads historically are really, really interesting, and the ones who Vlad Dracul, and so on, Vlad the Impaler, and basically Vlads 1 through 3.
This is bathing in the blood of.
Yeah, they were those guys were bleak. They gave us, with their real horrifying actions in life, they gave us a lot of lore around what turned into the worst of horror fiction. But the thing I like, one of the details I love that I pulled in Ashtown is Radu Bey is actually a brother of Vlad Dracul, who was given as a hostage to the Sultan and actually converted and became the commander of a lot of his armies. And he's the one who actually rode into his historic lands and just finally destroyed his own family and his brother. Wow. And he was even more bloodthirsty, but just differently. And so the fact that I've got the Vlads, I've got the Draculs in Ashtown, and I have Radu Bey in Ashtown. It's like I did not make those guys up. I've made up their presentation. I've made up who they are for me in my story. Yeah. But I'm stealing those characters and being inspired by those really dark historical characters. Then they're strangely treacherous but still dark brother, Radu Bey. So anyway, I really do. I like stealing stuff from history, and I understand where the vampire things came from. I don't like how gothic it all got. I think I don't care for all the the melodramatic women in
night dresses. Yeah.
the best treatment of vampires ever was Terry Pratchett.
Oh,
Terry Pratchett is the only one I trust with a vampire.
Yeah.
But one of my favorite scenes.
I was afraid you were going to say Dracula Dead and Loving It.
No. Pratchett, one of my favorite scenes, I forget at the beginning of which book, my daughter could tell me immediately, but there's, this couple on the stage, they're riding the carriage and they're coming to the inn in this bleak little village, and there's the big castle up in front of the moon.
This is Carpe Jugulum, I believe.
Probably. But at the very beginning, and then this vampire turns into a bat to fly into their honeymoon chamber and, of course, destroy consume the bride. But as he flies in as a bat, the cat eats him. Like the cat just takes the bat out and eats the bat, and like the end for him. But Pratchett's one I trust with vampires, and not very many other people.
Well, it reminds me, we just read Prisoner of Azkaban and how annoying it is to have werewolves stuck into Prisoner of Azkaban.
It's like,
stop it. I love the reveal. I love that, but couldn't have been not a werewolf, and it only would have been worse if he were a vampire.
Yeah, that would have. Yeah, I'm so grateful she didn't really do that.
Yeah,
like imagine if we had started inserting Robert Pattinson into Harry Potter. Well, that's that. Yeah, I don't love vampires, but obviously I say that, but I have members of the Dracula family in my own stories. So there, but they're not very gothic. They're not very gothic. They don't have their lapels popped.
Yeah.
They don't have sharp teeth.
Nate is not one of the most gothic people that you will ever meet.
Despite
being a
sitting here
artist.
in sweatpants. Because hey, I just finished coaching basketball, but it's track season now, so the life in sweats can continue.
Oh, I'm about to start rugby, so
perfect. So we expect Brian to be here in sweats more often as well.
Yeah. Perfect.
Cheers.
105 done. Hi, it's Brian Cole here, wanting to let you know how you can support the Stories Are Soul Food podcast. You can do that by checking out Canon Plus. Head over to mycanonplus.com. Thanks for taking the time to listen to the Sasf podcast. We'll hopefully be seeing you at mycanonplus.com.